My name is Tessa Wade, and I'm 32 years old. 5 months ago, I was supposed to be choosing between two shades of ivory napkins and pretending it mattered more than it did. In 3 months, I was meant to be walking down an aisle toward the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Instead, I was sitting in my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, replaying the words, "Being with her lowers my image," over and over until they didn't sound real anymore. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe my life, I would have said it was steady. Not spectacular, not tragic, just solid. I'm a landscape architect, stable job, good income, nothing flashy. I wear practical clothes, slacks, button-downs, boots, that can walk a muddy site without crying about it. I drive a reliable sedan. My idea of a wild Friday night is finishing a report early and watching something half-decent on Netflix. I didn't think I was exciting. I thought I was enough. My ex-fiancé, I guess, was Felix Sterling. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for 9 months. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. One of those rooftop things where everyone's wearing something that photographs well and talking about brands more than people. He worked as a creative director for a tech brand. Tailored suits, perfect hair, Instagram that looked like a curated campaign. He always knew which angle to stand at in photos. He knew what to order, what to wear, what to say, to appear effortless. Next to him, I was comfortably ordinary. At least, that's how I saw it. I thought the contrast worked. He brought the sparkle. I brought the ballast. He'd even joked once that he was a little too shiny, and I kept him grounded. I thought what we had was real. The wedding was set for 3 months away. Venue booked, invitations, sent deposits down on everything from the florist to the DJ. I had spreadsheets tracking deadlines, payments, seating charts. Of course I did. It was my language. Felix was increasingly tense about details, but I figured that was normal. I didn't realize the details stressing him out was me. Last Monday afternoon, I came home early from a site inspection. Heavy rain in the morning had pushed everything back, and by 2 hours my workday was effectively done. I decided to surprise Felix, maybe grab a late lunch together, something small, normal. Our apartment door was unlocked as usual. I stepped inside and heard his voice from the living room. He was clearly on a video call. That PR voice he used, upbeat and smooth, flowed through the hallway. I didn't think much of it. He worked from home a lot. I kicked off my boots quietly and started down the hall toward the bedroom to change. Then I heard my name. I know, he was saying, laughed thin at the edges. Tessa is just... She's nice and stable and all that, but my friends keep asking what I see in her. She's so plain. She doesn't have the look or the lifestyle. Being with her genuinely lowers my image. I stopped. He kept going, unaware that the hallway carried his voice perfectly. It's embarrassing sometimes, he said. Like that gallery opening last week. Everyone there was in designer everything, talking about their trips to Milan and Tokyo, and Tessa shows up in a department store blazer talking about drainage systems. I love her, but God, she's just so boring. Plain. Lowers my image. Embarrassing. There's a special kind of silence that happens inside your body when something breaks. Outside, I could still hear the muffled voice on the other end of the call responding, but inside, everything went quiet. I don't know. Felix sighed. The wedding's already planned. Maybe once we're married, I can work on her image, get her to dress better, network more. She just needs to be less herself. Less herself, less me. I stood there for another 30 seconds, maybe a full minute, hand resting on the bedroom door handle, breathing as softly as I could so he wouldn't hear. Some part of me wanted to burst into the room, scream, demand answers. The rest of me, which it turns out is the part that survives, just backed away. I turned, walked silently back down the hallway, slipped my boots on, and left the apartment without him ever knowing I'd been there. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry in the parking garage. I drove to a coffee shop across town and parked, then just sat there staring at the dash for a long time. Eventually, my body remembered how to move. I went inside, ordered something I don't remember drinking, and opened my laptop. If there's one thing I know how to do, it's make lists. I pulled up the wedding spreadsheet. One by one, I added a new column next to every vendor labeled cancellation policy. My hands shook a little at first, but they got steadier as the list grew. Venue, florist, photographer, DJ, caterer, decorator, officiant. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Felix. "Hey, where are you? Thought you'd be at the site all day." Then, "Everything okay?" I put the phone face down and kept typing. By the time the coffee had gone cold, I'd made a decision I didn't say out loud because saying it made it real. I wasn't going to marry a man who thought I was lowering his image. I went back to the apartment around 7:00. When I walked in, Felix was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, kitchen speaker playing some playlist we always put on when we cook together. He looked up with that familiar smile, the one I used to feel physically in my chest. "There you are," he said. "I texted you like 5 times. Had some things to take care of." I replied, hanging up my bag. "What things?" he asked lightly, half focused on the cutting board. "Just work stuff." He accepted it without question. Why wouldn't he? In his mind, everything was still fine. He moved around the kitchen talking about wine options and whether we should add a chocolate fountain to the dessert table like it was the biggest decision in the world. I nodded in all the right places. I laughed when he said something funny. On the outside, I was the same Tessa he'd just called plain and boring to whoever was on his screen. On the inside, I was dismantling the life we were supposed to share. Tuesday morning, after Felix left for a meeting downtown, I sat at the dining table, opened my laptop, and started making calls. The venue was first. Their cancellation policy was brutal. We'd lose about 50% of our deposit. "I understand," I told the coordinator. "Yes, I'm sure." "No, there won't be a new date." Then the photographer, the florist, the caterer, the DJ, the decorator Felix had insisted on to elevate the reception vibe. Some vendors were kind, some were annoyed. All of them processed the cancellations. Each confirmation email that landed in my inbox felt like another thread being cut. The dress was already paid for and hanging in my closet. Nothing to cancel there. The invitations were sent weeks ago. Damage done. Money sunk. By Tuesday afternoon, I had dismantled our wedding as thoroughly as I knew how. I'd lost thousands in deposits. I didn't care. I wasn't going to stand in front of our families and promise forever to someone who had already reduced me to a branding problem. That evening, Felix talked more about the wedding over dinner. Centerpieces, music cues, who we should seat away from each other to avoid drama. I watched him, wondering how someone could be so obsessed with appearances and so blind at the same time. I wondered if he knew, if deep down he could feel the ground shifting. He didn't. Not yet. Wednesday morning, I packed a bag while Felix was in the shower. Not everything. Just enough clothes for a few days, my laptop, my toiletries, the essentials of someone who isn't sure if she's leaving forever, but knows she can't stay one more night pretending. When he stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, steam billowing past him into the bedroom. I was sitting on the edge of the bed with the bag at my feet. He frowned. "What's that?" "I'm going to stay at Mara's for a bit," I said. My older sister lived about 30 minutes away. She had a spare room and a talent for not asking questions until you were ready to answer them. "What?" "Why?" he asked, confusion creasing his face. "I need some space," I said. "Wedding stress. I just need a few days to clear my head." He sat beside me, the mattress dipping. "Hey," he said softly. "If something's bothering you, we can talk about it." "Not right now," I replied. "I just need time." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, take a few days. Text me when you get there." Yeah, I promised I would. He kissed me goodbye at the door like we were just a normal couple navigating pre-wedding nerves. I drove to Mara's. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and just stepped aside. "Spare rooms made up," she said. "We'll talk when you're ready." That evening, my phone lit up with an email notification from the venue. They'd sent the cancellation confirmation to both of us. Standard procedure. My phone buzzed almost immediately after. "Felix," I answered. "Tessa," he said, voice pitched high with panic. I'd never heard from him before. "I just got an email saying our venue is canceled. Is this a mistake?" "No," I said quietly. "It's not a mistake." "What do you mean?" he demanded. "Why would they cancel?" "Because I said," staring at the blank wall of Mara's guest room. "I canceled it on Tuesday." Silence, a long one. You what? He finally choked out. Why would you cancel our wedding venue? Because I'm canceling the wedding, Felix. Another silence. I could almost hear him trying to reorganize the world in his head so it made sense again. What are you talking about? He said, voice sharper now. Where is this coming from? I came home early on Monday, I said. You were on a video call. I heard you. I heard every word. There was a small, strangled sound on the other end of the line. You said I was plain, I continued. That being with me lowers your image, that I'm embarrassing, that you'd fix me once we were married so I'd be less myself. Tessa, wait. No, I cut in. I'm done waiting. I'm not going to marry someone who thinks I'm an image problem. So I canceled the venue, the florist, the photographer, the caterer, the DJ, the decorator. Everything I could cancel, I did. His breath came fast through the speaker. You canceled everything without even talking to me, he demanded. You didn't give me a chance to explain. You explained yourself just fine on Monday, I said. You just didn't know I was listening. Tessa, please, he said, voice dropping, desperate. It wasn't how it sounded. I was venting. I pulled the phone away from my ear before he could finish and stared at the screen for a moment. Then I hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. I let it buzz in my hand until it went to voicemail. Another text came through and another. Please, Tessa, let me explain. It wasn't what you think. Can we at least talk in person? I turned the phone off and placed it face down on the nightstand. The room suddenly felt too small, too bright, too quiet. I lay back on the bed staring at the ceiling, feeling the reality of what I'd done press down on me. By the time Felix's best man Noah was standing on my sister's doorstep 3 nights later asking me to hear what Felix had admitted that night, I'd already dismantled our entire wedding. And I'd started to make peace with a hard, simple truth. The man I loved cared more about how I looked on his arm than who I was beside him. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I told my boss I had a family situation, which was technically true. My future family had just imploded. Mara left me alone most of the morning. She brought coffee to the guest room, set it on the nightstand, and disappeared again. I stayed in bed staring at the ceiling. My phone still turned off like it was some kind of bomb I wasn't ready to defuse. At some point, she knocked lightly and eased the door open. You planning on eating today? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes scanning my face in that big sister way that always made me feel 12 again. Do I need to beat someone up? She asked. A small involuntary laugh slipped out of me. It felt foreign. If you start with my bank account, I said, you'll have your hands full. Her expression sharpened. What happened, Tessa? I told her. The video call. The words plain embarrassing lowers my image less herself. The cancelled vendors. The call with Felix. Mara's jaw tightened as I talked. That smug brand obsessed. She stopped herself, exhaled hard. Okay. First of all, I'm glad you canceled the wedding. Even without talking to him first, I asked. She didn't hesitate, especially without talking to him first. He already told you how he really feels. You just happened to overhear it. I lost thousands of dollars, I said quietly. Deposits, fees, penalties. And you dodged a marriage to someone who sees you as a fixer-upper for his aesthetic, she replied. That's a deal, not a loss. I didn't fully believe her yet, but I wanted to. By lunchtime, the guilt started to creep in. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe he'd been exaggerating to impress whoever he was talking to. Maybe people said cruel, stupid things they didn't mean when they were trying to sound funny. Maybe. In the afternoon, I finally turned my phone back on. It vibrated so much it felt like it might jump off the nightstand. Messages poured in a staccato stream. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, Felix mutual friends, 2 bridesmaids, a few unknown numbers that were probably vendors or relatives. I ignored all of them except one, a text from my mom. Tessa, honey, are you okay? Felix called me crying and said the wedding was canceled. Please call when you can. I love you. I hit call before I could second-guess myself. She picked up on the first ring. Tessa. Hi, Mom. What's going on? she asked, voice already laced with worry. Felix said you called everything off. Are you hurt? Did something happen? Yes, I said. No, that's not helpful, she scolded gently. Tell me what happened. So I did again. The video call, the comments, the cancellations, the argument, if you could even call it that, when he found out. When I finished, there was a long pause. Oh, sweetheart, she said finally. I'm so sorry. That's awful. Did I overreact? I asked, voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I didn't give him a chance to explain. I just canceled everything and left. You didn't overreact, she said firmly. He told someone you lower his image, that you're embarrassing, that he'd fix you after you were safely married. What were you supposed to do? Walk down the aisle smiling and hope he grew out of it? I just keep thinking about the money, I whispered. All those deposits, the lease. I blew up 4 years of my life without even having a conversation. You didn't blow anything up, she said. He did when he decided you weren't good enough for the version of himself he wanted to present. You just refused to play along. I closed my eyes as tears finally burned at the corners. You're allowed to want a partner who's proud to stand next to you as you are, she added softly. Not as a before picture he plans to improve. We talked for almost an hour. By the end, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not comfort exactly, but validation, like I wasn't crazy for choosing the exit door. That evening, I texted Felix. I'm at Mara's. I'll come by the apartment on Sunday at noon to get more of my things. Please don't be there. He responded immediately. We need to talk in person, please. I made a horrible mistake. I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. You absolutely meant what you said. Sunday at noon. Please don't be there. His reply came in seconds. Tessa, please just hear me out. One conversation. I owe you the truth. I locked my phone without answering. Friday and Saturday blurred into a weird limbo. I wasn't really sad, not really angry, mostly numb. Mara made sure I ate. She put on comforting, mindless TV shows and sat beside me without pushing conversation. Every so often she'd mutter something inventive about Felix under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. Saturday night around 10:00, there was a knock at the front door. I was in the guest room halfway through folding and unfolding the same shirt when I heard Mara answer. A male voice drifted down the hallway. Hi, sorry it's late. I'm looking for Tessa. My name's Noah. I'm Felix's best man. My stomach dropped. A moment later, Mara appeared in the doorway. There's a guy here, she said. Says his name is Noah. Looks like guilt wrapped in a suit jacket. I exhaled slowly. Let him in. Noah stood in the living room, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes darting around like he expected to be thrown out. We'd met plenty of times before: dinners, group outings, wedding planning sessions. He was one of the few people in Felix's shiny world who'd ever felt remotely grounded to me. Now, he looked wrecked. Tess, he said, voice low. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is weird. Mara crossed her arms and stayed by the doorway. If you're here to convince her to go back to him, she started. I'm not. Noah cut in quickly. I swear I'm not. There are things you need to know. He won't tell you. And I couldn't live with myself if you didn't hear it. The sincerity in his voice surprised me. Sit, I said, gesturing to the couch. Mara, it's okay. She gave him a look that clearly said, I'm watching you. Then retreated to the kitchen, leaving the door open. Noah sat on the edge of the couch like he was afraid to sink into it. Felix is a mess, he said. He's been calling everyone, trying to figure out how to fix this. But that's not why I'm here. Then why are you here? I asked. He swallowed hard. Because I was with him the night you overheard that call, he said. Not in person, online. We were gaming. He dropped off for a bit, muted himself. I didn't think anything of it. I know he was on a call, I said. I heard my name. Yeah, Noah said quietly. That's what you need to know. That call. It wasn't with some random friend. The room seemed to tighten around us. Who was it with? I asked, though I already felt the answer coming like a punch I couldn't dodge. His ex, Noah said. Elena, the one he dated before you. For a second the words didn't make sense. They just floated in the air between us, disconnected from meaning. What? I finally managed. He didn't tell you they'd been talking again, Noah said. It wasn't a question. They've been in contact for a few months. She reached out after seeing your engagement announcement online. They started having these long calls late nights talking about their past, about how things ended, about what might have been. I felt cold crawl up the back of my neck. So when he called me plain, I said slowly. When he said, being with me lowered his image. He was saying it to Elena. Noah finished trying to justify himself, trying to make it sound like marrying you was some kind of mistake he'd made, so going back to her wouldn't look as bad. I stared at him. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Did he send you? He doesn't know I'm here, Noah said quickly. He'd lose it if he did, but he called me after you turned your phone off. He was freaking out, saying you'd canceled everything without letting him put it in context. Context? I repeated the word bitter on my tongue. He told me about the call then. Noah said bragged at first, honestly. Said he'd been talking to Elena, that he was just talking out his confusion. I didn't think much of it until he got to the part about how he'd described you. The more he talked, the worse it sounded. I told him it was messed up. He said he'd fix it, that he'd spin it somehow. Of course he would. PR even in his personal life. So was he planning to leave me? I asked. Was that the plan? Noah ran a hand through his hair. He says no, he replied. He says he was just testing the waters, seeing if Elena wanted him back. But he admitted that if she'd said, leave Tessa and be with me, he would have seriously considered it. The air left my lungs. He only doubled down on the wedding once Elena made it clear she'd moved on. Noah added quietly. She's seeing someone else. Serious. She told him they were done. So that was it. He hadn't chosen me. He'd settled for me when his past said no. Why are you on my couch instead of his right now? I asked. Noah let out a humorless laugh, because I watched him try to figure out how to downplay this, how to manage the optics. He said he's more upset about how he looks than about what he did to you and you. You canceled a wedding and walked out the door the second you heard the truth. I respect that more than anything he's done this month. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He asked me to talk to you. Noah admitted, but not like this. He wanted me to soften it, make it sound like he just made a few unfortunate comments. I told him I'd try, but honestly, he met my eyes. You deserve the whole picture, not the PR version. Silence settled between us. So what do you want me to do? I asked. Hear him out. Take him back. Thank you for the transparency. No, Noah said quietly. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I just didn't want you thinking you were losing your mind. You weren't. He really did say those things, and he said them to the one woman he was seriously considering blowing up your life for. My throat burned. Noah stood. I'll go, he said. I've already complicated things enough. He paused, searching for words. For what it's worth. Tessa, you're not boring. You're not plain. You're the only one in this whole mess who acted like an adult. He headed for the door, then turned back. And you deserve better than being anybody's backup plan, he added. After he left, Mara emerged from the kitchen, eyes blazing. Backup plan, she repeated, incredulous. He was going to drop you if his ex snapped her fingers. I swallowed hard. He didn't choose me, I said quietly. He defaulted to me. Mara sat beside me on the couch and squeezed my hand. Then Sunday, she said, you don't just pack up your things. You make sure you never give him another chance to treat you like his second choice. For the first time since Monday, I didn't feel numb. I felt angry. And under that anger, something steadier began to form, a decision crystallizing into something sharp and unbreakable. On Sunday, I wasn't going back to negotiate. I was going back to leave. Sunday came faster than I expected. I woke before my alarm, staring at the ceiling of Mara's guest room while the morning light crawled up the wall. My body felt heavy, but my mind felt sharp, like every thought in my head had been sanded into something clean and precise. Mara stood in the kitchen when I emerged, holding 2 travel mugs of coffee. You sure you don't want me to come with you? She asked. I'm sure, I said. If he's there, I'll just leave. I'm not doing a scene in the hallway. You could always let me do the scene, she offered. I smiled despite myself. No scenes, just clarity. She pressed the coffee into my hands and squeezed my shoulder. Text me when you're done. I promised I would. The drive back to the apartment felt strange, like I was floating above myself. Everything familiar. The streets, the buildings, the turn into the parking garage felt filtered through a pane of glass. I half expected Felix's car to be in his reserved spot. It wasn't, but that didn't comfort me. It just meant he'd listened when I'd asked for space. I took the elevator to the fourth floor. My key felt foreign in my hand as I unlocked the door. The apartment smelled the same, looked the same, but it felt nothing like the home I'd lived in. He wasn't there. Instead, a stack of papers sat neatly on the kitchen counter, weighted down by a ceramic bowl. My stomach sank. His handwriting covered the top page. Tessa, please read everything before you decide anything. Felix, a letter, 6 pages, handwritten. For a moment I stood at the counter staring at it like it was dangerous. Then I pulled out a chair, sat down, and started reading. The first line hit like a blow. I've been lying to you and to myself for months. He went on to explain everything, confirming every word Noah had told me. 5 months ago, his ex-girlfriend Elena had reached out after seeing our engagement photos online. She said congrats. She said she hoped he was happy. She said she missed talking. That was enough. They started messaging, then calling, then video chatting late at night while I slept. He admitted he'd been comparing us, me and Elena, without ever saying a word to either of us. That he'd started questioning whether he was settling, that Elena had been the passionate relationship and I was the stable one. He tried to make the comparison sound logical, almost clinical. It didn't help. He wrote that during the video call I overheard he had been trying to convince Elena and himself that marrying me was a mistake. He said cruel, awful things because it made it easier to imagine leaving me. But then Elena told him she didn't want to rekindle things. She was with someone new, serious. And just like that, he realized how much I meant to him and threw himself into the wedding again. Backup plan. The words weren't written in the letter, but they vibrated between every line. He insisted nothing physical had happened. He said the emotional cheating got out of control. He said he'd cut off contact with Elena after I left on Wednesday. He said he loved me, said he was ashamed, said he wanted to fix things, said he'd go to therapy, said he already scheduled a session, said he would change everything, even though the one thing he wanted to change most had always been me. When I finished the last page, I read the entire letter again, not because I needed clarity, because I needed confirmation that he really had written the words I saw. I folded the pages slowly, deliberately, then tore them down the middle and again, until the letter was a pile of ripped confetti on the counter. My hands didn't shake. The decision had already been made days ago. This was just closure. I grabbed an empty trash bag, threw the pieces inside, and tied it off. Then I got to work. Packing took about 3 hours. Clothes, books, toiletries, keepsakes, personal documents. I left behind anything that had his fingerprints on it. Gifts, decor. He'd chosen kitchenware he insisted we upgrade because mine wasn't aesthetic enough. I didn't want any part of the life he'd curated to photograph well. When I finished, the apartment looked both familiar and hollow. The silence felt heavier now, less like a home and more like a showroom. After closing time, I placed my apartment key on the counter. Next to it, I left a single sheet of paper. Felix, we are done. Don't contact me again. I have already begun the process of removing my name from the lease. You have 60 days to refinance or secure a new place. Please respect my boundaries. Tessa. That was it. No apologies. No explanations. No emotional cushioning. He'd spent months rewriting the truth in his head. I wasn't about to let him rewrite this too. I slung my bags over my shoulder, took one last look around the space we'd built together, and walked out. When the door clicked shut behind me, it sounded final. In the car, I sat for a long moment with my hands on the wheel, breathing through the sting in my chest. Not pain, not exactly, more like the bruise left behind when you finally remove something sharp. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, explained the situation, asked how to get my name off the lease as cleanly as possible. He talked me through everything documents to sign steps to initiate timelines. He said I was doing everything right. By Monday morning, I had officially canceled the last vendor still waiting on a final answer. I sent them a polite email, thanked them for their time, and informed them the ceremony wouldn't be happening. They replied within an hour. "We're sorry to hear that. Wishing you peace as you move forward." Peace. I hadn't even realized that was what I'd been feeling for the past 24 hours. Not happiness, not relief, but a clean, quiet kind of peace. By Monday evening, the entire life I had planned with Felix was undone, not shattered, not chaotic, just dismantled carefully, precisely, piece by piece, until nothing remained that could pull me back. The next 3 weeks blurred together. Felix tried to reach out. Texts, emails, calls from numbers I didn't recognize. He even showed up at Mara's once, and she'd stood in the doorway like a bouncer until he finally left. I didn't respond to any of it. One of the reasons I didn't, I knew that if I gave him even one opening, one conversation, he'd slip into PR mode. He'd spin things. He'd talk about miscommunication and context and wedding stress. He'd make me question what I heard. He'd minimize. He'd redirect. He'd make himself look reasonable. But I'd heard the truth before he knew he was being watched. That was the only truth I needed. About a week after the fallout, Noah texted me, "I'm sorry for how it all happened. Felix is devastated, but you deserve better than what he gave you. If you need anything, let me know." I responded, "Thank you for being honest with me. His feelings don't change his actions." He wrote back, "You're right. They don't." And that was the end of that. 3 weeks after canceling the wedding, I signed the lease on a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, just mine. I moved in the following weekend with Mara's help. She brought wine, I brought takeout. We sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and toasted to clean slates, even though both of us still had cardboard slices of pizza in our hands. "Do you feel okay?" she asked. "I do," I said. And I meant it. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was steadiness. Something like my center of gravity returning to me after being misplaced. That night, I slept on a mattress on the floor and for the first time in a long time, didn't dream about walking down an aisle towards someone who wouldn't have chosen me unless someone else rejected him first. The kind of silence I woke up to the next morning wasn't emptiness. It was freedom. And I had no idea just how much more of myself I was about to reclaim. It's been 5 months since I canceled the wedding. Sometimes I still wake up expecting to hear Felix humming in the kitchen or see my old wedding spreadsheet pinned open on my laptop waiting for me to update deadlines and color-coded payment tabs. Instead, I wake up to soft morning light, filtering through cheap blinds, a potted plant that's somehow still alive, and the quiet hum of my own breathing, my own space, my own future, my own life. I didn't realize how much of myself I had edited down to fit into Felix's world until I wasn't in it anymore. After the move, I threw myself into the things I'd neglected. Work-long walks, a few freelance consulting projects that paid better than I expected. I started going to the gym, not as a reinvention, but because movement helped clear the leftover static in my head. I met friends for dinner. I reconnected with a coworker who used to ask about my weekend plans before I started answering everything with variations of wedding stuff. And slowly, I started feeling like myself again. Felix reached out one last time about 6 weeks ago, an email long enough that it took me a full minute to scroll through it. He didn't ask to get back together. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He explained, or rather, he explained himself in the most curated, self-aware way a PR professional knows how. He said he'd started therapy, that he was working through his attachment patterns. He said he realized he'd never fully processed his breakup with Elena and had projected insecurities he didn't understand onto me. He said he'd convinced himself he needed someone more exciting because he'd been terrified that nothing in his life felt stable unless someone else was choosing him. That he mistook chaos for passion, insecurity for chemistry. He wrote, "Calling you plain was never about you. It was about the parts of myself I couldn't admit were broken. You were steady, and I was threatened by steadiness because it didn't distract me from the truth." It was thoughtful, detailed, emotional, beautifully worded honestly, but it didn't change the reality. He had tried to trade me in for someone who didn't want him. He had insulted me to justify his own guilt. He had only recommitted to the wedding when his past rejected him. His message ended with, "I know you'll never forgive me. I don't expect you to. I just want you to know the truth. Losing you was the greatest consequence I could have faced for the choices I made. I hope someday you find someone who sees the steadiness in you as the gift it is." I read it once, then I deleted it, not out of anger, out of closure. There was nothing left to salvage, clarify, or redeem. A month ago, I ran into one of his friends, Sophie, at a coffee shop. She'd been at one of our dinners once, someone from his work circle whose name always showed up in event photos. She recognized me immediately. "Tessa," she asked gently, like she wasn't sure if saying my name might scratch a wound. We talked for a few minutes, small talk updates, polite orbiting around the topic we both knew we'd eventually land on. Finally, she said it. "I heard about the wedding. I'm really sorry things ended the way they did." "Thank you," I said. "Me too." She hesitated. "Then Felix moved. New job, new city. He's trying to start fresh." I nodded. "I hope it works out for him," I said, and I meant it. Sophie gave me a look I wasn't expecting, soft, almost sad. "He really did love you," she said quietly. "He just didn't know how to handle it when his past came back." I held her gaze. "Maybe," I said, "but love doesn't mean much if you hide it behind shame." She nodded slowly and we parted ways. I walked out into the sunlight and realized something that had been growing quietly inside me for months. Maybe Felix did love me. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he loved the idea of who he wanted me to become, but his intentions didn't outweigh his actions. Love isn't a justification. It's not an excuse. It's not a free pass to treat someone like a placeholder. Since then, I've gone on a few dates. Nothing serious. No sparks yet. That's okay. I've learned to spot red flags faster now. Learned to trust the unsettling feeling in my gut. Learned what it looks like when someone is attracted to the idea of you, but not the reality. And I've learned something else. I'm not plain. I'm not boring. I'm not an image problem. I'm steady. I'm consistent. I show up. I don't need to be glittering or glamorous for someone who wants a partner more than a prop. Being someone's ballast isn't a flaw. It's a strength. And the right person won't see stability as something to fix. They'll see it as something to build a life on. My brother, who has always been the blunt one, asked me last week if I regretted how I handled everything. "If you could go back," he said, "would you confront him immediately before canceling everything?" "No," I said simply. He raised an eyebrow. "Not at all." If I'd confronted him, I said, he would have tried to talk circles around what I heard. He'd have framed it as a misunderstanding, minimized it, spun it. He's good at that. My brother nodded knowingly. By the time I found out about Elena, I continued, the wedding was already canceled. My things were already packed. There was no room for him to manipulate the situation. I protected myself. "That's pretty calculated," he murmured. "Maybe," I said, "but it kept me from marrying someone who saw me as a before picture." He smiled then. "Mom says you seem happier." "I am," I said truthfully. "Life feels quieter now. In a way that makes sense. It's strange. I used to think the worst thing that could happen would be losing someone I planned to marry. Turns out the worst thing would have been marrying him." I learned something important through all of this. When someone shows you who they are, even if they're not talking to you, believe them. Believe the words they say when they think no one's listening. Believe the version of themselves they show when they're trying to impress someone else. Because that's the truth. Everything after that, the apologies, the explanations, the therapy, the change, is just the fallout. And I won't build my life on fallout. My name is Tessa Wade. I'm 32. I live in a small apartment with mismatched furniture and a plant that refuses to die. Some days are harder than others, but most days I'm glad I walked away before I became someone's second choice. I'm glad I chose myself, and I'm glad I believed him the first time he told the truth. Maybe this story touched something inside you, a moment where you realized you were being edited to fit someone else's picture, or a time you had to be brave enough to walk away from a future that wasn't right. It's terrifying to dismantle a life you've built, but it's more terrifying to live in a lie. If you've ever chosen yourself over being chosen by someone else, or if you're still gathering the courage to do so, share your thoughts or your own experience in the comments. And tell me where you're watching from so I can create more stories just for you.